Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Free For All, the Dead Man Inc. Productions video game fight podcast. Round 1, fight. So, if there's one thing that, video games are good at a lot of different things, but one thing that video games aren't usually that good at is transferring themselves into other mediums. And for that reason, I decided to have a little bit of a tricky question for us to start on. What is the greatest video game movie of all time? And you can interpret this question any way that you wish, on what definition of best you decide to use. But whoever would like to get started, whenever you're ready.
I'm going to go with Super Mario Brothers.
Damn it, you stole my movie!
So Hanukkah Outcast arguing for Super Mario Brothers the movie.
As you know, this past December was the 30th anniversary of Super Mario Brothers, the video game. So myself and my fellow Hanukkah Outcast, we decided to discuss the movie, of course. Like, is it the world's greatest blunder? Or was it the world's greatest mistake? Is it the world's greatest cult movie? As luck and coincidence have it, there is a website, Super Mario Brothers Archives, and there is an international UK Blu-ray version. Now, if you all have a DVD for your computer, it's region-free. You can buy this DVD, play it, you'll get a documentary. There's no audio commentary. And there's also in the works a comic book that's actually going to be a sequel to the legendary Cliffhanger that, if any of you are interested in, and I have to admit, this movie went through so many transformations. It finalized in a Mad Max, but Tom Hanks was going to be Mario at one point. It was going to be directed by Spielberg, Joe Dante. It went through so many even though they won't admit to it. And had this movie made actual, factual Koopa coins, you would have seen Mario, Toadstool, Yoshi running through the Magic Kingdom today.
Right, rather than having it have bombed to the box office.
Well, you know what, it did bomb, but here's the thing. When I saw this movie in theaters and then I decided to rent it on VHS, I watched it back to back and I was like, there were rumors that there was going to be a PC version of this movie. Like, you would see Mario Brothers on a PC based on what you just watched.
Right.
You were, like, going to just have, like, the, those Super Scope guns from the...
like that kind of thing.
That's what they use. Yeah, that's what they use for the Devolver guns when Koopa and his Goombas go into the real world and they turn the mobster into a monkey. That's what they are.
Right.
So...
Pat, do you have your movie? You have
since Hanukkah has totally stole mine.
Double Dragon.
No.
Oh my God, no.
Street Fighter.
No, Mortal Kombat, the original.
Oh, you stole mine! Go ahead. You're my guest.
It was the one of the few, and as I look at it, I'm like, this is one that actually kind of stuck to the way things go. It actually, not a whole lot of people know nor care that Mortal Kombat does actually have a story behind it. Liu Kang being the descendant of Kung Lao, and all these different things going on, and making sure that Liu Kang was the one to defeat Shang Tsung and the Emperor and the rules. And I think they did better than anyone of sticking to the actual source material, and still making a entertaining movie. I won't say good by any stretch of the imagination, but it was an entertaining movie, and it's a movie that I'll watch every now and then. The soundtrack was a ton of fun, and just they went through a lot of great things. So it was a very interesting setup and a whole lot of different fun to go on with it. So.
And Cameron Diaz was supposed to be Sonya Blade, which would have been interesting, had she not broken her hand during the rehearsal.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. Could you imagine? Yeah. What has she been in recently? Nothing.
Not much.
After The Mask. Yeah,
right.
So she was rehearsing and broke her hand, so they had to bring in, Schwarzenegger's daughter from Last Action Hero.
Because that works. So my choice. So this one isn't probably going to be a very popular one for some people as far as when you define the best one. But if we're going to argue Mortal Kombat, we have to also argue Street Fighter the movie.
Yes!
Yeah, of course! So, the thing with Street Fighter the movie is it's a very interesting case when you talk about authenticity of source material. Because in certain ways, this movie is completely separate from the source material. But in some ways, it's, like, ridiculously close. I mean, going off the idea that, like, Street Fighter 2 had, like, a direct, like, narrative to begin with that could have, you know, been interpreted in, like, linear fashion is kind of laughable. But the fact that, like, they did, you know, have a lot of fun with this movie, they did incorporate a lot of, like, good comedy into this movie, and the fact that, like, it's actually really interesting to see, like, the characters all being, like, dressed normally at the beginning of the movie, and it's like the plot of the movie is slowly having them come up with, like, logistical reasons to turn into actually all of their actual Street Fighter outfits throughout the movie. You know, Jean-Claude Van Damme, you know, not the best actor in the world, but I mean, he sold the hell out of the speech the best he could. And
well, we could go home.
But to be honest, the real thing everyone wants to talk about this movie is the performance of Raul Julia as M. Bison. Of course.
Here's some trivia.
People throw around the term, like, blank actor made this movie so much, but I don't think anywhere does it become more apparent than his performance in this movie. Like, his speech about the destruction of Chun-Li's village, you know, the whole speech of, you know, like, for you it was the most important day of your entire life, but for me, it was Tuesday. Doesn't sound like the line you'd hear out of, you know, out of a Street Fighter movie. It sounds like something you'd hear out of what, you know, like a movie that would be considered, like, the greatest action movie of all time. Like, that's a line that sounds like you hear out of something like Die Hard, or something you'd hear out of, you know, like a really good Rush Hour sequel, or something like that. Like, it sounds like it is like a moment of, like...
really good and Rush Hour can never go together.
Fair enough. But, you know, that line transcends, like, your typical, you know, video game movie cheese, and, like, for a glimpse actually becomes, like, a legitimate movie. If you can get over, like, you know, just even see this movie got as far as it did, as far as turning Street Fighter 2 into anything resembling a movie, I believe deserves some applause.
I own it on Blu-ray, and here's some trivia. Jean-Claude Van Damme, he was actually supposed to be Mortal Kombat. The video game was supposed to be based on him.
It was just...
And then unfortunately, because he said no, the whole Johnny Cage is actually based on Jean-Claude.
Which also makes it so ironic that, you know, he ended up being a Street Fighter the movie instead of the Mortal Kombat movie.
So instead, when he changed his mind and it was too late, he says, "Oh, Street Fighter's gone first." So you actually would have gotten, you never would have gotten because of rights issues, Street Fighter versus Mortal Kombat, which everybody craved for. But you were going to at least get the movies, even though one came 1 year after the other.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I did debate. Here's the thing: when it came out in theater, Street Fighter, it was that or IQ. And the movie, if you've never heard of IQ, it was with the late, great Martin Landau and Meg Ryan and Tim Robbins. Yeah, he's Albert Einstein. I decided to see that over Street Fighter. And actually, both have surprisingly aged well, but I own Street Fighter on Blu-ray. It's enjoyable. It feels like a Roger Corman type of ordeal. And Mortal Kombat, I just remember that was like a rock opera. That theater was packed to the gills when that came out.
Right. And I have to say, though, like, if you're going to talk about a movie that feels like a Roger Corman project, Super Mario Brothers the movie, I mean, there's the thorough line of how you got from game to end product is one of the most fascinating things I've ever seen. Like, how would
That's because of so many reasons. One of the major reasons was Hollywood didn't have the budget or the technology. The thing was, it was all ambition, and even though if Spielberg and pre-DreamWorks could have made this movie work, or Robert Zemeckis, But the problem was is that Hollywood said, well, it's a guy going through a Mushroom Kingdom. We saw it in the weekday afternoon TV show with Lou Albano.
Right.
It could have worked. But Hollywood wasn't too sure, and everybody was fickle, and you had so many screenwriters and so many directors and so many
Right.
major actors. Danny DeVito was going to be Mario at one point.
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret that all three of these movies had their share of development hell.
Yeah, but when you bring in the creators of Max Headroom, I feel that it could have worked, but the problem is that you have this husband and wife team that were so like control freaks that the actor who plays Toad, I forget his name, Mojo Nixon, he said that he had to go to talk to the husband while the wife was trying to take control. The agent came in for this husband and wife team, told them to get out, and I think somebody else tried to take over for
Right.
directing. It's a cluster of a movie, but I don't know. It's like if it's on at 2:00 in the morning, I can't turn away.
No, I understand. Moving on to final arguments. Final note on Street Fighter, the movie. Street Fighter the movie is an interesting case because if you look at anybody's list on either the greatest video game movies of all time or the worst video game movies of all time, there's one of the very few movies that will be on both lists every single time. And I think that's because I feel like everyone gets feel like they get something different out of watching this movie. But for me, what I find so fascinating is, like they took a series that's not known for complex, ridiculous story, but is in fact known for incredibly colorful characters from ridiculous backgrounds. And the movie did come up with a way to actually get all of these characters in one place, had some fun with the idea of having all these characters transform into their Street Fighter 2 people throughout the picture. And they turned M. Bison into an incredibly memorable character, and although I don't know if he really appreciated it because he wasn't able to do much acting after this role, that it became, for a lot of people, like one of the greatest roles of Raul Julia's career. And is an awesome example of how you take a movie that could very easily be throwaway and became something extremely memorable. And that is why I own Street Fighter the movie on Blu-ray in my collection.
Well, I think the only thing I have to say for final argument, it's very short and sweet. Of all three of these movies, mine's the only one that got a sequel.
Annihilation, yeah. I don't
count that as sequel. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, the problem is they didn't get Christopher Lambert back. That
Right.
ruined the whole thing.
Oh, I always said that, yeah. Hey, look, they always have that YouTube series, but Street Fighter, it's got Jean-Claude and it's got Raul Julia, drop microphone, walk away, and Super Mario Brothers has John Leguizamo, the late great Bob Hoskins, and Dennis Hopper and Mojo Nixon and Samantha Mathis, drop microphone, walk away. So that's all I gotta say.
Ouch! Alright, so going through, we're going to cast our final votes here. Each of us votes for one person, not themselves. I was leaning towards Pat for a little bit there, but that mic drop, damn. Right at the end there. I will say, like, Mortal Kombat, the thing is, like, my pitch for Mortal Kombat has always been, like, if you ever want a video game movie that just does all of the things, it's, like, the best one you can watch. If you want to watch someone, say, finish him, if you want to see, Luke Cage hit Goro in the balls, if you want to, like, every single one of, like, the things that you would, like, the individual moments, like, 3-second moments you'd want to see in a Mortal Kombat movie are all there. But as far as, like, the Super Mario Brothers movie as being, like, the culmination of everything that is right and wrong with adaptations of video game movies, like, it really is the one that everyone points to. So I'm going to cast my vote to Jason.
Ooh.
Because he stole what I was going to do, I by default have to vote for Jason, which I'm kind of insulted that Ken doesn't have the same philosophy.
Fair enough.
Well, since I can't vote for myself, this is a tough one, but I'm going to go with Ken because he picked Street Fighter, and of course,
Of course.
it's interesting it's just rewatchable because it's just such a guilty pleasure with the line reads. I mean, Mortal Kombat has several great line reads, and they were able to take a video game, but the problem is that it doesn't follow tournament rules like the video game. In Street Fighter, at least, besides, of course, I love the quick change to channel from Zangief when the truck is about to come through the TV monitors. That's just like, again, drop microphone, walk away. That's brilliant. How could you hate Street Fighter?
The thing I like about all three of these movies, at least with these two movies, I know Super Mario Brothers had some different story. Like it's, like with Mario Brothers, it's known behind the scenes now that Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo were like practically wasted through the entire production that came out a couple years ago. But the thing I do like about both Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter is that whether or not these movies were good, they're both made by cast you could definitely see gave a damn. And I think that's a big reason why, at least if they're going to have all these ridiculously cheesy lines, they're going to sell the hell out of it. And it's great when you see movies that have that. the thing. So, our next question here is, as many people know, one of the more common trends in video games is remaking older games in high definition for new consoles. We've seen this work positively in some regards, and we've seen it work negatively in some regards. But I want to ask you guys is if you could pick any video game that would receive a full HD remake, full HD, if you want to redo the art style, just clean it up, make a couple minor changes, that kind of thing game, what would you have it be? So take a second to gather your thoughts. Jason, since you won round number 1, I'm going to have you go first.
Oh, this is a tough one. I would say Arkham City because I just won on the PS4. I would love an Arkham collection. But if we're talking like classic, God, I mean, I would love to see Legend of Zelda from Super Nintendo. Like, if we're going like back to the days, I would love to see Zelda getting a high definition treatment and seeing what they could do. There've always been these rumors about making it like Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask, so possibilities would be endless.
So which Zelda game would you want to see in HD then?
Oh, the greatest, most underrated one of all time, Link to the Past.
Alright, so Link to the Past in HD, okay. My choice is a bit of a strange one, and I picked this one acknowledging that for like a lot of rights issues, this would never happen. But the game that I would choose for an HD remake, particularly is because this is a game that was revolutionary in its time, still holds up today in almost every single regard except for visuals. And that is the video game movie tie-in for the Sam Raimi Spider-Man 2. When this game came out, this was one of the first instances where people had the ability to, the whole concept of being able to take a real-life city and be able to, go and, actually be able to know things around the city and go to all the different places. The game would literally tell you, which part of New York you were in, whether you're, towards Central Park, or whether you were towards Chinatown, or wherever you were located, and the whole thing was mapped that way. On top of actually getting they got the entire voice cast to go in and do all of their roles, reenact the movie, but also be able to splice in all sorts of different Spider-Man villains all throughout it. But the problem is, this game came out pretty early into the lifespan of the original Xbox, the PlayStation 2, and the GameCube. And visually, the game just does not hold up. Try as it might, a lot of the FMV style stuff they used to make the likenesses of the actors and the cutscenes are almost laughable by today's standards, and there's just this almost this hazy filter over the whole thing because of the fact that the game has almost no contrast underneath the hood in order to actually make this thing hold up over time. And so, with the game being as good as it is, if you're just to take that and just give it a good polish all the way through, get some cleaner models in there, you can still keep most of the dialogue and the audio, because the audio and all that is still really good. Maybe get some better FMV, or even just sample in scenes from the movie if that's what you wanted to do. But I think that a remastered version of that would definitely take a game that normally doesn't take the one Achilles heel in a game that almost holds up 100% and really crank it up to 100. Pat?
So they're already doing the one I want, so I can't choose that one because Final Fantasy VII being redone is the greatest thing.
Fair enough.
So probably Leisure Suit Larry. Yeah, those games. Those.
All right, that's an interesting choice.
Oh, I haven't heard about those in years, and I heard they were going to remake those.
Okay. No, in all seriousness, this one's going to be kind of off the wall, and I'm not sure how they do it. But the gameplay on this game was so much fun, and to figure out a way to do this in an HD would be something really, really cool, and it's kind of a cult classic. Fester's Quest from the original NES. It's such an interesting, dungeon crawler, top-down Zelda, blaster there's so many different things that mashed up that should have never worked, but the game was so much fun, and it was such an interesting amalgamation of different things that I'd be interested to see what they could do to make it either first person or third person over the shoulder as opposed to a top down situation, and just kind of run it through the cleaner and see what they can do, because there was some decent puzzle work in there. The power ups were great because you had the power ups, but you had the power downs too, and just an interesting kind of some interesting mechanics happen in that game that are a little bit underrated, and it's a fun cult classic to me. So it'd be fun to see what they could do as a high def third person, first person shooter type situation.
Awesome. Fight commence. Whoever wants to.
I'm gonna have to put my 2 cents in, Ken, about the whole Spider-Man 2. I had forgotten about that early series when the movies came out, but there was even a Spider-Man game that came out for PS1 that felt like the comic. Stan Lee was narrating, and you were fighting Carnage and Venom, and not only did you fight Venom, but he had kidnapped Mary Jane, and you had to beat Venom and save Mary Jane from being drowned in a bucket of water at the same time as she was being lowered down. You had to go from one side of this warehouse to another and press a button to have her being lifted up from a chair from being, drowning in this vat, which was awesome. And then you had Carnage, and then he merged with Doc Ock, and you had Ock Carnage, which was great. And you didn't fight him; you just had to get away from Ock.
Right. I think that was the 64 Spider-Man. I think you're thinking of.
It was sure. They ported to PS1.
Okay.
And it was pure nightmare. If he got you, he would tear you to pieces, and it was really nightmarish. That's the one that they've never seemed to want to talk about again, and it's a shame. Conqueror's Bad Fur Days, I think they put that, they rebuilt it.
They did that one.
Yeah, so there are so many, but God, I almost forgot. That's actually a good one for the Spider-Man.
I would say that the main argument I see with your two that's kind of interesting is the idea that both of you guys picked top-down games between Fester's Quest and Link to the Past. And we have seen somewhat of a version of Link to the Past with Link Between Worlds, what it would look like in a slightly more modern engine with a slightly more updated art style. But I can see it could work, because if you look at something like the modern Gauntlet game or something like that, there is examples of HD top-down games like that out there. But at the same time, I think Zelda has a little bit more of a chance to show off things graphically, make itself look really good in HD than Fester's Quest does. Fester's Quest, the problem with it for a long point is that Fester's Quest is just a very, very slowly paced game. Everything shoots slow, everything moves slow, it's I don't know if that's something that could be improved in an HD port, but I'm
you're
just
also
not sure what else you're going to be able to do with that.
You're also talking about from an 8-bit game to a current game. The slow pace. Really, when you think about it, the original Legend of Zelda was an extraordinarily slow paced game, and the thing was terrible. Honestly, I still struggle to play that game. Not as much as I struggle to play Zelda 2, but we're just not going to talk about that dirty little stepchild,
right?
Which I'm actually replaying right now. But it's just this. I think because in the 8-bit realm you didn't have the option to do first-person or third-person shooters. You didn't have that option to do something of that nature, of having that person on camera looking at everything from their perspective. All you see is their back. You had to go top-down because that's all the system could handle. You started, and really you didn't even start seeing over-the-shoulder shots and follow cams until the 64-bit generation, really. PS1 and N64. Even the Super Nintendo, not so much. All these things had all these. Everything was top down. Everything was side scrolling. You really had no third dimension until you got to that. And we're not gonna count Blades of Steel because God, the what was it? Motion, the Motion 7 chip or whatever it was called. What was it called? Mode 7. Mode 7.
Mode 7. Oh my goodness.
7 graphics, which gave everybody in the world a stomach ache or a headache.
Right.
But yeah, it'd just be interesting to see how you could reimagine it with a first person or third person view, and that's
Totally.
you can't do top down now. I mean, you can as a retro feel, but you can't do top down as
Okay.
a regular feel now.
All right. So moving on to final arguments, then I'd say with Spider-Man 2, although like I said, I am aware that the rights issues kind of timeline up, but fantasy time machining this thing. I like it. My main point before was the fact that like the thing that I think makes it so appealing is that outside of graphics, there really isn't that much that needs to be toned up. Like the fact that like even with all of like the chippy cardboard looking buildings back then, just the pure feeling between the sound design of being able to press a button, grab onto the side of an actual building and have the game physics actually anchor you around the corner, press the button to let go of the web, and then press the button again to launch the next web, was like a revolutionary moment in being able of like gaming be able to make you feel a certain way. It's like the same way when the first time we realized that you could use motion controls to make you look like you're waving a lightsaber. It's just one of those things that I feel like people always wanted. After we finally got past the days of the old school Spider-Mans where he would literally just swing webs from the heavens and go wherever he needed to go. And being able to re-experience that with, updated graphics, being able to polish things up, it's a really cool way to even just re-explore that Raimi Spider-Man universe is through that game, and being able to see other villains that weren't in those movies. It feels like you're kind of playing through the Spider-Man movies that never happened. In a way, and that's one of the main reasons I would totally love to replay through Spider-Man 2 with a fancier paint job.
I'd more or less just be interested to see what they could do with a game like that, and using that the Addams Family lore and the franchise and the way that was done, and the family mechanic, and just all the different things that could be done, and see how turning that camera from the top down to behind the play to behind the character or in the character's eyes, and seeing how that works out, just because it creates something different. It changed how Metroid played from a side scroller to Metroid Prime, which was a third dimension platformer, and it'd be fun to see how it could be done and how it could be redone as it is. I mean, Zelda, it's interesting to see anytime we see the third person, like the motion controls made Twilight Princess Skyward Sword a little bit better, but it'll be interesting to see how that could be done with just a true, more, I don't know, straight up third person. So,
all right, Jason.
Tough one. I keep going back to Spider-Man. I don't know what it is.
This is your final argument, not your vote, just so you know.
Oh yeah, final argument, Spider-Man.
His final argument is giving his vote for me.
Well, there's no argument with it. I mean,
no, fair enough.
I mean, how can you argue about possibly one of the most ambitious ideas to put your favorite hero in an actual city? And I'm a New Yorker, so that was a dream come true for me. But Fester's Quest, unfortunately, I played it for like 5 minutes, and it was sluggish and slow. So I have to go with Spider-Man on this one.
Fair enough. All right, I would vote for Pat because I feel like Pat definitely got some good definition to it once he started getting to the point where he was arguing on like how you could change perspective on the game and maybe use like a different fighting style to fix a lot of the problems the original Fester's Quest had. Like, for a reason, I was just picturing over like a Fester's Quest Doom in first person. It's just kind of funny.
I'm voting for Ken as well because while I like my idea, the Spider-Man 2 game was a ton of fun. It was that first sandbox type of game, and to be able to explore New York City as Spider-Man was a lot of fun, and you really can't go wrong with that. So to see that updated and kind of tweaked up and physics fixed and things like that would be it would be a lot of fun.
I'd also have to go with Spider-Man with this one, Ken. I mean, ever since the movies, they tried to make original games like Web of Shadows and what was that time traveling one and Shattered Dimensions.
Oh man, that is such a good. It's a really good like if you can get it. It's a really good like if you can get it cheap 10-hour Spider-Man game. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see a sequel to that and finally put Spider-Ham in as a playable character. But I know somewhere out there you can play him as a character, I think on a mobile app game or something.
It sounds likely.
Yeah, but past all that, I just... They're enjoyable if you can get the mechanics to work. And the problem is that for the first one, for the movie, I know that one, you actually could get the mechanics to work for a while and put in some cheat codes and play as Mary Jane.
Yeah, there's some fun stuff they did with the first one.
And Bruce Campbell, of course, doing the tutorials as
on both games. Yeah, that was awesome. All right, so moving on to question number 3. All of us are 9 times out of 10, you're always playing as the hero in a particular game, but every hero is only as good as their villain. So our third question up is who is the greatest, either the scariest or the darkest, however you want to interpret it, the best video game villain?
Ganondorf.
All right, why don't you go ahead and go first because you've already done yours.
Ganondorf is a shapeshifter. Ganondorf can be anything that he wants to be. Ganondorf can go through dimensions, and Ganondorf will die when he wants to die, and not before that. And he can just snap his fingers and encase maidens in stone, turn people into ill-shapen trees, just create chaos for the sake of creating chaos. He's very hard to find, very hard to kill, and it's like a snowflake. Every time you fight him, no two battles are ever alike. Best one is probably Ocarina of Time, where he's just like playing an organ, and then he picks his head up, and it's like, oh, you want to fight me? But he tests you, and the thing is that he'll never, like, King Koopa, there are times he'll be on your side, and you can play him in a couple Mario RPGs. The same thing goes with any of the other Nintendo mascots. I mean, we can even go to even other non-Nintendo and Sega mascots, if we even went to Seymour from Final Fantasy X. But Ganondorf, he's just somebody that he'll die when he wants to and not before, and he'll come and go as he pleases, where I was going to pick Seymour from Final Fantasy X, but Seymour's kind of like, okay, you know, I'm goth, you know, life is an endless misery, yeah, I'll die, and, you know, so I have to, it's Ganondorf for the win on this one.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and go second. My choice is a little bit more of an uncommon one. This villain isn't necessarily the most powerful villain, but I would definitely say as far as like the way that he manipulates the player and the way he makes the player just feel so uncomfortable all the way through the game, as being the driving force, one of my favorite games of all time, which is Voss, the pirate captain from Far Cry 3.
Ooh.
Now, Far Cry 3 is a game where you play as these millennial kids who get stranded on an island and captured by human traffickers. And the leader of them is just this super intimidating South American man with this all these crazy tattoos and scars and this big mohawk. And the way he just gets up in your face constantly. With, like, even from the beginning of the game, the opening cutscene is literally just him pulling back the cell phone that he stole from you guys. He's just talking about how good of a phone it is. And throughout the game, like, he not only starts the game just right up in your face, even, like, to the point where, like, when he grabs your head and starts manipulating you, the camera turns and contorts every which way that he goes. So it actually completely takes advantage of the first-person perspective to make you feel all the more immersed in just how this guy's manipulating and taking control. Opening the game brutally kills your brother, which is like the only guy who ever stood a chance of getting you off that island. barely lets you run away, and for the rest of the game, continuously, at just the right moment, the second that you forget that he's there, catches you one more time, and every single time says the exact same catchphrase that just haunts your dreams, where he asks you, have you ever told you the meaning of the word insanity? He only tells you the meaning once, but every single time he finds you, he just repeats the same line. Like, he will disappear from hours and hours of the game, to the point where you even, like, forget he's around, where you'll just be, like, you finally got the helicopter, you're gonna fly home, and then there he's there at the corner of the screen with a rocket launcher. As he just walks up to you through the wreckage, grabs you by the skull, looks you straight in the eyes. Have I told you the meaning of the word insanity? Like, just to the point that by the end of the game, when they give you a sequence, a dream sequence to kill him at the end, where you literally just see phased ghosts of him coming at you, you just have to fire it again and again and again. It's as if the game is cueing into the fact that you hate this character so much that just stabbing him with a knife or shooting him in a normal gameplay boss battle just wouldn't be enough. You have to just see this guy die again and again and again because you just hate this guy so much. And the fact that the game gives that to you shows how hateable and how horrid of a villain this man is.
You're both wrong.
Okay.
There's literally only one video game villain who has legitimately given me the creeps, and always has, always will, and it's ironic that this villain only has a MIDI laugh, and it is from Final Fantasy VI.
I saw this one coming, yep.
Dude, that guy is not only straight up evil, he's completely and utterly insanely evil, and he revels in it. You know every time he comes on screen because of that laugh. And that laugh, on a 16-bit system, 20 years ago at this point, the fact that it sends chills up your spine is incredible for this villain. The fact that he's able to, evoke a visceral response through a video game that has no reality to it because of the graphics level. There are villains in games on my PlayStation 4 that don't give me the chills that Kefka did. Kefka did not give a flying fornication for the world around him, and was willing to do whatever he had to rule whatever small part of it he could, and he didn't care how much of it was left. He literally unmade the world in order to rule it, and it's absolutely incredible that he doesn't get the villain love that he should, because dude is straight up crazy.
Fair enough. All right, commencing fight. I will say that I do agree with you to the extent that I do think that Kafka is underrated as a villain. My usual podcast partner who couldn't be with us tonight, Final Fantasy VI is like one of his favorite games of all time, so he'd have a hard time fighting that one against you as well. And Ganondorf is one of the the quintessential warlocks as far as gaming is concerned. The main difference between mine and yours, though, which I think gives an interesting element, is the fact that both of your villains are villains that have their power in their scenes because of power they possess, while in the case of Voss, it's power that he creates. Like, at the end of the day, he is just a crazy guy with a gun. But the fact that the guy's dialogue is just so good and the performance is just so well done that he's a villain that is haunting even when he's not there. Like, that's what I think is so intimidating about this villain, is the fact that in a game where you're constantly looking around corners for, like when a tiger's going to jump at you or a Komodo dragon or whatever it's going to be, but at the same time, this guy that you barely hear in passing on radio signals every now and then, and maybe only shows up every couple of hours of gameplay just to remind you and puts you on the brink of death multiple times, throws you off of a cliff into a giant pool of water, with rocks tied to your legs, you still survive. Shoots you right in the chest, which accidentally hits a lighter, barely saving your life, as you have to crawl out of a pile of burning corpses, still alive. To the extent that this guy he comes off as almost this angel of death character. It's this guy that is just so focused on making sure that you stay dead. Even though outside of to him, you're just a minor annoyance. But to you, this guy is like the embodiment of evil. Because he just will not stop following you. You just know that until this guy is dead, you're never going to be safe from just knowing that he could just be around any corner just ready to take you down.
Well, I mean, for crying out loud, Kefka drops a continent on your head. I mean, this guy completely just... Not only does he drop a continent on your head, which in turn unmakes the world, he also basically ethnically cleansed an entire species from the face of the planet in the process of doing it. He's completely and utterly deranged. He has no regard for any kind of life, human, esper, animal, whatever it may be. He has no regard for the life. So it's the simple fact that he cannot empathize with anything. He has no care in the world about anything other than what you're doing. Some random pirate captain, yeah, he's terrifying, and what's the insanity? Yeah. Ganondorf is a fairly good argument, but Ganondorf and the princess and Link are all pretty much the same character in that they're all basically continually reincarnated, going forward as part. They're three parts of the same thing. They're wisdom, power, and courage. That's kind of their. All three will always be together. So it's always going to be those three parts making a whole. Ganondorf's great. I love him as a villain, but without Link and Zelda, he's nothing.
I am going to argue with myself because my brain locked up. I shouldn't have picked Ganondorf. The more I think about it, it's even better that I almost... It's an underrated puzzle game called Seventh Guest. There's a character, Henry Stolf, who he literally makes the deal with the devil where he is able to create childlike toys, but what happens is the souls of the kids are now forced to be in the toys, and they have to stay there for all eternity. And so this way, Stolf gets to keep his soul, but then he's kind of punished, and he has to haunt the house for the rest of his, unnatural life. And it's such a creepy game because you go through these mazes, and every now and then you'll hear his voice laughing and cackling and saying feeling lonely. And there's really no power meter either. He'll appear or he won't appear, or there are ghosts that'll appear and won't appear, and it's like really bizarre 16-bit digital animation at its finest.
Right.
But I mean, Ganondorf, you're right. It's not a challenge because anybody will think of that one, but for a game that I remember playing late at night at 16 years old with the lights off in the basement and nobody around, and that music, and every now and then, like, the piano would start playing, and the keys would start, like, going really crazy when you're trying to go through an endless maze and seeing disembodied heads coming in and out of nowhere and disembodied voices, like if you make the wrong turn in the maze,
right,
saying feeling lonely. I would change it to Stolf at this point.
All right. Moving on to voting. I think most of us got what would normally be our final arguments kind of covered in our pieces. I've got to give my vote to Final Fantasy Hitler. I think there is some... definitely the genocide argument helped a little bit. I didn't even know about the continent thing. Like, I would say I knew about the suplexing of the ghost train, but I didn't know...
That's the greatest.
That's I know my roommate acknowledges that situation, but that's the argument I always make with him. He's like, no, Final Fantasy VI is one of the most serious story greatest of the Final Fantasy games, and I would totally love to see an HD remake of it. And I'm like, isn't that the one where you suplex the ghost train? I'm like, and your problem is...
I would pay good money to see Saban actually suplex the ghost train. Like, even if it only had a 1 in 1,000%, 1 in 1,000 chance of hitting.
All right, Jason, where do you cast your vote?
Final Fantasy VI is 3 on Super Nintendo, right? Is that the one I'm thinking of?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, then definitely...
Because porting is weird.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely go Final Fantasy on this one.
All right, Pat, your vote?
You made a great argument for it, Ken, so I have to go with yours. I've not played Far Cry 3.
Right.
But you made a great argument for it, so I gotta give it to you.
If you get a chance, check out a Let's Play of the first 15 minutes, and you'll totally be sold. It is definitely one of the better of the the kind of open world surviving kind of liberate the bases kind of games. I mean, now it's old enough to be dirt cheap anyway, so if you ever get a chance, highly recommend it. Moving on to question number 3. So we are, let me think. So we got, we're 1 point each now, aren't we?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so our next 3 should go pretty quickly, but there are also some really good questions. So we've talked about Zelda a little bit on this podcast already, with 2 of our previous questions. And Zelda is currently on an anniversary year of its own, as well, which has recently been celebrated by the release of Twilight Princess HD. So I figured we'd follow this up with a question that I'm sure will have no controversy whatsoever. What's the greatest Zelda game of all time? You can pick, like I said, you can pick from any particular game in the franchise that you wish. Pat, since you won our previous round, why don't you go ahead and go first?
Jason's gonna hate me for this, but it's gonna be Link to the Past. It is just my favorite to this day. I'm a big Zelda fan. I am currently recollecting all of my Zelda cartridges and games. Thankfully, I have a wonderful retro game store in town, so that has helped with a lot of it. But it is. There's something special about that one. It's really the first one where a really fully developed story came to be of this boy, this princess who calls out to him and their connection. It really is the one that set the format for really all of the Zelda games. The 3 things, then you go to the 8 dungeons and you save the princess, or you complete the Triforce, or however it is. There's a pretty standard format for Zelda games now, and that's not a bad thing. This is kind of where it all began. So, the Master Sword and all those really big elements from the Zelda series kind of stem from A Link to the Past.
Jason?
Well, yeah, who isn't going to say Link to the Past? But I'm actually... People think this is the turd in the punch bowl, but I actually am going to give the second game, The Adventure. That one I feel was ambitious. It's kind of like with Mario 2, that it was actually a Japanese game and they cut, copy, and paste the characters, put them on a Japanese import and claimed it was a Mario sequel. Zelda's Adventure, or Link's Adventure, or whatever you want to call it, I will say this much about the game. Dungeon crawling games or dungeon explorer games, video games evolved in a very short period of time. We were used to just collecting points, and we went from collecting points to fighting bosses, and then we went from collecting points and fighting bosses to exploring dungeons and getting artifacts like Indiana Jones. And I feel that Zelda always knew how to get it right. Like when you would walk up to that treasure chest, you never knew what you were going to get the first time you played the game. Was it going to be a compass? Was it going to be a weapon? Was it going to be a piece of the map for the dungeon? And you never knew, and it always had that great theme music, that dun dun dun. And of course, over the years, they've changed it where you can open up the chest and Link will dive right into it, like in Wind Waker, that cell shaded game. And I came very close to recommending that one, but the problem with Wind Waker is that it's always going to get its second, pardon the pun, wind. The second Zelda game, Link's Adventure, I don't think people appreciate it because it was so different on trying to be, I guess, a Dragon Quest game, and the fact that you really didn't know how to navigate yourself through this world, and it just didn't feel like the first game. But I like some of the spells, and I like the boss battles, and even though Link fighted his own shadow at the time, it wasn't original, but it was challenging and different. And if you ever watch the Angry Video Game video where he has to use the Power Glove and he beats Link's shadow, yeah, that's pretty much how you would do it. So all in all, it's a good game, not a great one, but I feel that it deserves a home.
Absolutely. I'm going third then, and as much as I don't want to be the cliche guy here, just because I know that we'll get all the fan rage hate in the world if no one argues, at least somewhat for this one, although I do think that this is what I would normally choose. I went back and forth between this game and Wind Waker HD, which is the last one that I currently finished. But outside of its growing pains, which, to be fair, the 3DS version did fix a great deal of them, I would have to pick Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Now, for a lot of people, this was the jumping point on for a lot of particular Zelda games. And although Super Mario 64 was like the big point that people jumped on and saw what like 3D graphics could do and did that whole thing, Ocarina of Time was one of the first like what you would consider like grown-up games that I ever played. I got it I literally remember which birthday I got it on and what store I bought it from.
Did you get the gold cartridge?
Huh?
Did you get the gold cartridge?
I don't remember, to be honest. Like, I don't think I did the gold cartridges until Majora's Mask.
Yeah, I remember pre-ordering the game, and GameStop wouldn't sell it to me because I had reserved the gold cartridge, and they ran out of them. And I said I had to wait like a week or two later. I said I've been online for like 2 hours just to pick up the pre-order. I said I'm not going anywhere until you give me a copy of the game. And they gave it to me, and they didn't even realize that it was a gold. I said, yeah, I was like livid. But
right. So the thing that I like about this one so much is that it does it does the best job at a lot of different things as far as Zelda games. It has by far the most iconic music of any of the Zelda games, the most memorable themes, the most memorable versions of almost all of the characters. It has some, even just the dungeon designs. The fact that they are extremely intuitive. I very rarely run into points where the dungeons kind of throw me into a brick wall. And even just the way that it used that sort of... is also the first one that used sort of that sort of styled theming for even the weapon selections in each dungeon, where, because of the fact that the weapon used in a particular dungeon was the one that you use primarily to fight the end boss, it created... it really exemplified what the whole point of a boss battle is supposed to be, is... test, a example of how to test all of the skills you've built over the course of completing a particular dungeon and putting that into a combat form. Although it wasn't drenched with side quests, things like the Bigoron quest or some of the, the Heart Piece quest and stuff like that, definitely helped kind of the completionist edge for people that wanted that kind of experience. And this was also, like, probably one of the better Ganondorfs we even got. Just like you talked about before, like, I remember the first time I ever got to the game where I climbed up the spiral staircase internally and heard the pipe organ music getting louder and louder and louder. And, just the, like, the iconicness of those fights, all the way throughout that game. And... even just the fact that, like, back when you played it, the idea that you got to play as adult Link was, like, considered, like, a twist back then. Like, you didn't necessarily know that when you first got the game. And that completely opened up, the game even farther. Like, it was even, a pretty long game for what N64 was considered back then. That's, so like, for like all those reasons, I really feel like, despite it being to an extent the cliche answer, despite its growing pains, Ocarina of Time has always been the best for me.
See, I have two words that invalidate your argument, Ken.
I think I know what they are, and I have a counter argument.
Water temple.
And I have two words that change that as well. 3DS port. Because that was one of the biggest things they fixed in that particular ported version of the game and it's the simplest thing, because to be honest, the actual mechanic of the switching was not necessarily that complicated. The problem was that it was very difficult to tell exactly which one you needed when, and all they had to do was fix it, was just label the rooms to change the water levels, and change the camera angle so it would show you the angle of what was important. And just those two tiny little fixes in that particular port of the game fixed almost the entire water temple in its entirety. I mean, that was a problem with a lot of older games back then, is that it was so easy to miss things like that, where, like, a tiny little misstep like that, which nowadays would, get ported on, like, day 4, now would become, like, infamous difficulty spikes that no one can do anything about.
I still get like an eye twitch when I talk about
right?
Damn temple. It's just the bane of my existence. Oh, God.
I don't remember. I mean, I played the game once. I beat it once. There's so many Zelda games, but Pat, I mean, Link to the Past was the major reason why I wanted the Super Nintendo besides the Mario World game. I kind of wish that Link to the Past would have come with the system. I think eventually it did when 64 came out. Can you bring up possibly one of the most anticipated games for Nintendo 64 besides, again, people knew about Mario, and I remember renting a Nintendo 64 just to play Mario and either going to the gas station to fill up on gas or going to my Blockbuster to make sure I would get the system and running out of gas right before I got to the gas station, but I was okay because I had my N64 that I rented. But when I finally sat down and played a 64 version of Zelda, it didn't feel the same as the first couple games that I played, and eventually the ones I would play on the Game Boy. It's a tough one. Pat, I have to go with the one I would play the most out of all three that we discussed, including Wind Waker. I have to go with Link to the Past. It's the one that I've beaten the most, the one that I enjoy the most, and the one I can master the most, because it is possibly the most original to go through dimensions, which is something you didn't do much in video games. It really, like, reinvented the wheel. So I have to go with that.
All right. Well, moving into voting, I think Jason kind of just cast his. So,
even with the wonderfully terrible water temple, I have to go with Ocarina, because it's still an incredible game. Besides the water temple, there's also the camera that always drove you nuts. But that is and always will be an extraordinarily difficult point on every video game that uses 3 dimensions, and it's always going to be a sticking point. No one has ever gotten it completely right. So, Ocarina, yeah, it is iconic. It is the gold standard. The music in that game was incredible. So I have to cast my vote there.
All right, and I'm going to cast my vote to Pat. Not only did we have one of our contestants jump ship halfway through the argument, but I do think, as far as that, the iconicness as far as the 2D era of Zelda games, I mean, he was right with his main point that it did, in fact, set the standard, and it definitely helped establish a lot of that. So, what we have left, so that's 2 points, Pat, and 1 point to each of us, correct?
Correct.
Yep.
All right. So that means I think we're gonna put up one more question. So obviously, if Pat wins this, then Pat wins, and if anyone else gets it, then they'll leave the final 2 people in a tiebreaker, and then like I said, they'll leave the last two people in tiebreaker, and whoever's left standing will be the judge. So, for this final question, I do need to grab something really quick, and then we will go ahead and fight it. This is going to be a good one.
I'm afraid of what he's grabbing. I know Ken too well.
I've got a colored pencil.
I've got my controller.
I've got my controller. Well, this is for the PC. I mean, my PS4 is back there. I had the Xbox One for a few months, and I was like, no.
I don't blame you.
No PlayStation.
Especially with Lion's Head going defunct. that was like the only games I ever wanted on the Xbox.
Yeah, let's see.
All right, we're back. So, with potentially our final question of the night, this is one kind of has to be asked. On our particular podcast night, we happen to have 3 different people, all in different various areas of the comic book industry and podcasting. So, being on a video game podcast, that leaves one obvious question that has to be asked. What is the worst comic book game of all time? Now, I'm not going to forbid any particular answer from this question, but I will say, at least for my vote, that creativity might get you a couple of bonus points, and I will let that be interpreted any way you wish. But fight with your hearts best you can. Pat, you won the previous round, so I'm going to have you go first.
Oh my God. The amount to choose from.
Unfortunately, yes.
Oh my gosh. We're talking just does E.T. count as a comic book?
No.
Wow. So, since I get to go first, I'm actually probably going to be cheating, even though it's not all that creative. But there is one incredibly bad video game that's based on a comic book, and it's so incredibly bad that I don't know that anyone even owns a copy, even collectors. I think they forbid it from being in a collection. Superman on the N64.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, this train wreck of a game. I actually played it, and I felt like I needed to give up my N64 for having put it in there to a nice social services company for the abuse that I had put on it. So yeah, I just the mechanics were all wrong. The flight was terrible. If I remember correctly, he clipped through buildings without destroying them. This isn't Man of Steel. It just everything was just everything wrong. It was the Zack Snyder of video games. That's what happened here.
Hey, don't say something we can never take back.
All right, Jason, why don't you go ahead and what's your pick?
Oh, God, as a comic book video game connoisseur, especially with comic books being made into video games, you figure it'd be like chocolate and peanut butter, but every now and then you'll get a Mounds bar or an Almond Joy. And I feel there's one in the X-Men series, there's Silver Surfer, there's anyone in the Batman series. I mean, even Superman, besides the N64, there was Nintendo and the Atari version. But if we're going to go, me, I'm a huge Batman fan, I have to go with the Batman Forever game. And the reason for that is I found out about this game while watching World Wrestling Federation Superstars and them trying to plug this game and have this rock opera type of commercial for it, because Mortal Kombat was still a big thing. We were going from 16-bit graphics, from digitalizing human beings and putting them in video games. So I figured, okay, this has to be the next generation of video gaming. And and to see Batman fight the Riddler, or Val Kilmer Batman face the Jim Carrey Riddler in a much better battle from what I saw in the commercial, because he was wearing that blender with the aquarium rocks and the thing, and lightning was coming all over the place, and I just didn't care because it looked like a much better thing when I saw in the movie. So I couldn't wait to pick this up, and again, mechanics were absolute shit, and eventually the Angry Video Game Nerd viral videos finally explained what you had to do to control Batman, to use the grappling hook, to maneuver up and down shafts. Like, you had to press a certain button and use the control button and hold the select and up and down and A and B at the same time to fire a grappling hook and to go up or down a shaft. It was just a giant mess. And Batman, all he did was uppercuts, and he would just, like, the way he would jump in the air, his knees would disappear and his ankles and like go right into his body. It was awful. I rented it, thank God, played it for about 5 minutes and said, that's 5 minutes of my life that I'll never get back. And that also compared to me sitting through Batman and Robin. That's how bad it was. So that's the Zack Snyder of video game for me. It is, forget about the box draining your brainwaves. Batman Forever is going to drain your brain and then some. Worst version I've ever played of the Dark Knight.
Alright, well, okay. So, I'd be lying if I didn't know that Superman for the N64 was going to make it into this fight. I'd be stupid if I didn't think it was going to make it in. And I have played Batman Forever for the Super Nintendo, and I know how incredibly bonkers that game is. But there does exist a game.
Oh, he's searching.
Hold on a second.
He's got to pull it up.
It's got to be Silver Surfer.
Oh boy.
Oh, something worse. So there does exist a game that could, in fact, has been argued as being worse than Batman Forever on the SNES, and in fact has been argued as worse than Superman 64, and is even in some circles actually referred to as the spiritual successor of Superman 64, a game that is so bad and so vile that not only do I own this game, but I paid money out of my own pocket just to say I own it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a thing that actually exists. Aquaman Battle for Atlantis on the GameCube.
You know, we're not even trying anymore. When you forget about the Aquaman game, I remember hearing about this. It's that bad?
Oh, it is that bad. First off, so this is based on the Justice League cartoon Aquaman with the hook arm. Graphically, so Aquaman does not have eyes. So, like, imagine the Superman flying mechanic. Now imagine that in, like, crappy graphics underwater, but at half the speed. The game claims to have an in-depth combo system as you randomly follow this weird, like, broken compass around the map every which way, looking like it's basically like playing like an underwater torpedo around with like the worst graphics you've ever seen. Which is accompanied, by the way, by full comic book page cutscenes made from graphics still images that are worse than the game. It literally looks like they just built these images in Engine and then just took the screenshots and put word bubbles over them. All of which are accompanied with no sound.
Okay. Question then, because you keep saying he has no eyes, so is he like a blind cavefish? Is that how he works?
That's how the graphics look. He just has random like amoeba hair that keeps like floating up and down every which way, and there literally are just no eyes. Like it's literally you going around fighting the exact same enemy, just the one enemy type. Not all in one place, but no, they feel the need to spread them across everywhere, so each level feels like it takes like 20 minutes to beat. Is the game just stops in slow motion, puts you two against each other as you just randomly fighting the whole time, and then it makes you do these bomb disarming levels, because everyone knows, from what we learned from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the NES, everyone loves underwater bomb disarming levels. But instead of disarming the bombs like they do in that game, he literally just picks up the bomb, throws it into the building that it's supposed to blow up, then it blows up, and that's how you disarm the bomb. You stop the bomb from blowing up
so no
by
electric
throwing it into
seaweed?
the building that's going to blow up.
No electric seaweed at all?
No electric what?
Seaweed.
Not that I saw, but keep in mind, like, there were supposed to be, like, other gameplay modes and stuff if you got far enough into it, and unlockable characters. Like, people made this game with the assumption that you were going to play it for longer than 20 minutes. Which is probably the biggest crime I could say about this game, is that people who made this game, from the all too commonly known developers, Lucky Chicken Games.
Okay.
One of the most famous game developers of all time. Really thought this game had some legs. Just
Chicken
really
legs.
thought this was going to go someplace. I paid over $5 for this crap.
Overpaid is what I say. If I remember
If
hearing...
they gave me $5, it'd be overpaying for this crap.
I remember hearing about this, and I think when Electronic Game Week Monthly was still a big thing, they couldn't even review this. It was like, between this and Game Informer, like, they only do like a one-shot review, and it's like a 2 or 3 sentences, not even a full paragraph, and I'll just give like a final 1 rating score. Yeah, I no pictures, nothing. I think that's where Aquaman ended up being, and I haven't heard anything since. They really... I think it's because of the Justice League cartoon. They tried to reboost him. I mean, the good thing is, well, we get to see him in Yawn of Justice. We get to see him in the Kick-Ass Justice League cartoon, where he's a total badass, but no, I can't even imagine, like, does he have any boss battles, or what does he do in the game?
Well, let's see what the game says.
I want to say there's a sealed copy on eBay for over $100.
Oh, there isn't.
Yes, there is. I'm looking at it.
Oh my god. Okay, so apparently it has 21 levels, including 4 submarine attack levels. Fight over 11 enemy types and bruising 3-dimensional underwater battles. If you're the GameCube generation, you don't get to brag anymore that you're portraying things in 3D. Like, that's just not something you get to brag about anymore.
Oh god, this is just wrong on so many levels.
Control is cybernetic morphing hook hand, like it. Like I said, from the completely professional company Lucky Chicken Games, like everyone's heard of them, right?
I've heard of them because of blurbs in video game magazines, but between this one and the Justice League Heroes game, I don't know what people were expecting. Really, I mean, are we going into arguments right now?
If you guys want to go into final arguments, by all means.
Okay, I gotta argue about Batman Forever again, and I'm defending the hell out of this one of why it should get a vote. Batman Forever, I go back to what I said before, I had huge expectations of what we expected with video game mechanics, video game control, gameplay, boss fights, so on and so forth, especially what we saw the Batman games evolve into now with the Arkham series, where Batman's utility belt does more than just throw 1 or 3 batarangs, or it just uses the grappling hook to maneuver up and down. I don't understand, with all the things you could have done in a 16-bit video game with final fight and RoboCop versus Terminator. I don't understand for the life of me why you made this game so bleak and depressing and so hard to where you would have to find an area to shoot up a grappling hook to boost Batman onto a second level of a building. It just doesn't make an ounce of sense to me. This is a tough one. I almost wanted to say The Mask, but again, that's also a game that I played for like 10 minutes and I thought,
Right.
okay, it's like one level and there's nothing to it, and there is a boss fight and it sucks, and it's almost in the same aspect where you have the world's greatest detective and you can use all these mechanics and you're just not utilizing what you could do with the combo moves now, what you could do then. So yeah, this actually is the biggest disappointment, the biggest turd in the punch bowl, and probably the biggest waste of trying to digitize humans into a video game next to, dare I say, the Mortal Kombat sequels when you ported them, not the arcade versions. When you port them into the home versions, especially when we started to see this come out on Sega CD and they tried to transfer it there, especially on the PC. So,
Pat, final arguments?
Kryptonite fog. Instead of just saying, hey, you know what, our draw distance isn't that great, we needed to use the fog of war, basically, like so many games, I mean every game does, it masks the draw distance. It's, granted nowadays it's a lot farther away, but I mean in that era it was always there because draw distance couldn't go that far. But and that also helped them explain why Superman doesn't have all his powers, and you have to collect power-ups to get those powers, and, oh, wait, those powers are limited. You can't just use them. It's like, is this Superman or not? It's kind of piggybacking off Jason's argument for Batman. It's like, you've got this superhuman being who can do all these things, freeze breath and X-ray vision and laser eyes and all this different stuff, but wait, you can't use it in this game. No. That's literally like Batman not being able to use his grappling hook, for Christ's sake.
All right, moving on to my... oh my god, this is going to make my final argument. So here's my thing. I think we can all agree all three of us have some pretty crappy games here. I don't think anyone's in disagreement about that. My thing is that, like, there is a small level of justification that can be made with both of your titles in the sense of the era that both of your games were made. I mean, this was, either during the N64 era or the NES era, there was still, you're dealing with people still trying to figure out how to do these licensed games, especially with the NES, the Super Nintendo era. Like, there's a sense where, where no one was expecting much out of a lot of these kind of things, where they were able, people didn't care that they were that bad. Even the N64 era, sure there was some other better games out there, but there was still somewhat of, a thought of like, well, there's still a justification of like, oh, well, it's just the N64, like, it's old, it's difficult to develop for, whatever. Or the Super Nintendo being like, well, I mean, they're working on 3 different versions, whatever, it's old, they didn't care about it that much. And it's a lot easier to justify those games on that level. But the newer these games get, and the newer and better tech that they're compared to, the harder it is to justify how bad these games are. Aquaman Battle for Atlantis came out in 2003. And yet it looks as bad as a game that came out in 1993. More like 97, but you get my point. Like, the fact that, this game came out on the same console that we actually got Spider-Man 2, or that we got, the original X-Men, the X-Men movie games, or like even just somewhat be considered like mediocre, games like like X2 Wolverine Unleashed or like crap like that. Like that stuff is like solid gold compared to what we got out of Battle for Atlantis, and I would think by the year 2003, or 2004 in the case of the Xbox port, because obviously Xbox needed a whole extra year to get in on that action, that, I feel like by then we could expect better. And we should have expected better, even from Aquaman. All right, who wants to cast their vote first?
I know I can vote for myself, but God, Superman just flying through rings, or Aquaman who's a blind cave fish that just is kind of like that semen thing from the Dreamcast console, and just you try to raise it and talk to it, and then eventually it just dies of neglect or whatever. Both I would never want to keep in my collection or try to sell back or for any reason, and yet at least I know their comics are much better, their cartoon counterparts are a lot better. Even the Zack Snyder counterparts at this point are a lot better, and that says a whole lot. But I have never played the Superman 64. I've seen it, I've heard about it, I have never picked it up, rented it. I've seen it in conventions. I just don't have the time to play the bloody thing just to say I played it. Aquaman, the same thing. I've seen the videos, but I feel that Aquaman is always going to be the butt of people's jokes. I mean, there's that internet meme where he can summon Cthulhu. Superman has been kicked to the curb so much because of Zack Snyder, what they've done to him. So, you know what? He has the powers of the god, and yet he's still milquetoast. And I'm going to continue that. So, I'm the goddamn Batman fan. Batman versus Superman, I have to say Superman 64, the point because that game just sucks.
All right, Pat, your vote?
I see. I have a very similar theology on that. Of it's, when a Batman game can go bad, you've done something wrong. Like Aquaman. While he is a badass, I love Aquaman. And the reboot they did with him in the New 52, I think no one got a better reboot than Aquaman. Because they actually finally showed, this dude actually is a badass. The problem is everyone expected Aquaman to be crappy in that era. So it's kind of like, everyone's going to see that. For a Batman, anything to be bad, to screw up Batman is extraordinarily difficult, and it takes an extraordinary amount of talent. So I got to give my point to Jason.
Oh.
All right. I think, although originally I did argue that I was looking for a more creative argument originally than Superman 64, it is hard to argue with the evidence that you laid out in front. I mean, it is definitely very difficult. You had some really focused points there, so I am going to say that my vote and for the win is going to be Pat, and by a ring, the winner of our first ever free-for-all is going to be Pat, so.
Woohoo! Come from behind. I started out 0-2.
So before we close out tonight, if you'd like to see a certain fight that you like posted in our next episode, please leave it in the comments below. If you'd like to check out more of our content, subscribe to us on twitch.tv/deadmeninc or at youtube.com/deadmeninc or whatever /deadmeninc that you would like. Pat, if the lovely people at home would like to see more of your stuff, where can they find you?
digitalnerdage.com or facebook.com/digitalnerdage, at Digital Nerdage on Twitter. Pretty much anything Digital Nerdage. Yeah.
And Jason, if people would like to find your stuff online, where can they find you?
Facebook.com, the main page, Hunnigalcasts, the group page, the Hunnigalcasts, where any of the friends or fans want to promote their stuff. That you can do on the group page. We also have the Hunnigalcast Podcasters Cafe. If you have a podcast you want to advertise or discuss podcasts, you can go there. And, of course, we have Ed's Gamers and News and Reviews and Kendra's Anime page. And, of course, Twitter at Hunnigalcasts. Email hunnickfeedback@gmail.com.
Awesome. And if you'd like to check out some more comic book goodness, if you check out on Digital Nerdage, you can find the entirety of the first volume of my book, The Man Who Watched Batman Volume 1, is now available for free to read chapter by chapter at your leisure on digitalnerds.com, or you can check out The Man Who Watched Batman volumes 1 and 2, both for sale on Amazon. For all of you comic book fans out there. Until next time, we're going to call game over on today's episode, but tune in next time for our next thrilling installment of Free For All.